My 17-year-old daughter was banned from my sister's wedding for being too young. They said it wasn't personal, just policy, as if that made it hurt less. I didn't argue. I just said, we won't be attending. But that night I saw my daughter quietly deleting the dress photos she'd saved for weeks. No tears, no anger. Just that stillness you only see in people who've already been hurt too many times. When Christmas came, I made one quiet change. I stopped setting extra chairs, stopped pretending peace was love, and the entire family lost it. They called me cold, dramatic, ungrateful. But the truth, that silence was the first honest sound my home had heard in years. Before I share my story, I want to know you're here with me. Just say listening in the comments or tell me where you are. I love hearing how far my story can reach. Sometimes even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. Thank you. And now, here's my story. If my story reaches you, if you've ever been the one who stayed quiet to keep everyone else comfortable, please subscribe to the channel. My name is Zephyr Hale, and this is how I learned that silence can be louder than forgiveness. It was a Thursday afternoon in East Nashville, the kind of quiet day where the sun falls in soft angles through the blinds, cutting gold stripes across the living room floor. I was standing by the counter pouring coffee into a chipped mug when I heard the scratch of pencil strokes from the next room. Nova was sitting by the window sketchbook open, her hair tied up messily the way she always did when she wanted to disappear into a drawing. At 17, she had this stillness about her, a calm that wasn't peace, but something learned, something careful. I used to think she got that from me. Now I know it came from surviving. I still remember the first time she ever touched me. It was 9 years ago, at a gas station off I-40. She was 3, standing beside me while I paid for snacks. She'd been with me for only 2 weeks, still 2 quiet eyes always scanning exits. When I stepped out of the store, she looked around, wide-eyed, lost for half a second. Then she reached out and grabbed my hand, small fingers locking around mine like she was making a decision. I didn't move for a full minute, because I realized it wasn't me who had chosen her. She had chosen me first. That moment stayed with me through every dinner, every visit, every time someone reminded me that she didn't look like a Hale. My family, the Maddens, had a way of turning love into etiquette. My mother, Elaine, was the kind of woman who complimented you and corrected you in the same breath. My father, Howard, could make disappointment sound like a sermon. Sutton, my middle sister, loved being adored, and Reese, the youngest, turned every conversation into an audience. I used to be proud of being the calm one, the reasonable brother, but reason has limits when it comes to your child. The last Thanksgiving we spent together in Savannah still sits like a film I can't erase. The table stretched the length of the dining room, the kind that made you raise your voice just to be heard. Candles flickered against crystal wine glasses, the smell of roasted turkey filling the air. Elaine leaned toward me, smiling at Nova, then said, "She's gotten so tall, your little girl. Not our granddaughter, your girl." Howard chuckled, clinking his glass. "Doesn't she remind you of you at that age?" Sutton, same quiet face. Everyone laughed, including Sutton, who looked perfect in a red dress and the attention that came with it. Then she asked, "So when do we get to meet your real kid, Zeph? You know, when you and Morgan have one of your own." Nova froze mid-bite. I saw her fingers tighten around the fork. I forced a laugh, said something about how 2 jobs were enough family for now, changed the subject. But I could feel the blood rising behind my ears. My hand stayed under the table, gripping the knife so hard my knuckles went white. After dinner, Nova disappeared into the guest room. Later, when I peeked in, she was drawing again, everyone at the table, their faces turned away. That night, as we packed to drive back to Tennessee, I told myself the Maddens meant well, that their words weren't cruelty, just habit. But when I looked at Nova asleep in the back seat, her little hand still resting in mine, I made a promise I hadn't said out loud, yet she would never again be treated like she was temporary. I didn't know then how fast that promise would be tested, or that it would come from the one person I thought still had a heart, my sister Sutton. It was a cold Monday night when the envelope came, heavy and cream-colored, the kind you almost feel guilty opening. The return address read, Sutton Madden Engaged Taylor, Charleston, South Carolina. Morgan handed it to me while Nova sat at the kitchen table finishing a history paper. The house smelled like tomato soup and pencils, and for a moment it felt almost peaceful. I slid my finger under the flap, unfolded the card, and felt the weight of it in my hand. Gold lettering, embossed details, a faint trace of perfume. It looked expensive enough to be fragile. I read the words twice before I caught the one line that hollowed me out. Adults only. 18 plus, strictly enforced. My first thought was a mistake. My second thought was Sutton. Nova must have seen my face because she set her pen down and asked, "She doesn't want me there, does she?" I hesitated, reading it again, hoping the words would change. "It's an 18-plus wedding," I said finally. She looked at me for a long time before nodding. "Is it because I'm adopted?" The air went thin. There are moments in parenting no one prepares you for, the ones where your silence feels like betrayal. I told her, "No, sweetheart, it's not that." But we both knew it wasn't true. It wasn't the first time she'd noticed the difference, just the first time it was printed in gold. When she went back to her homework, I sat down at my laptop, clicked the RSVP link, and selected "Not attending." No explanation, no drama. Just a quiet refusal. The next morning my phone lit up. First Sutton. "Hey, just saw your RSVP. Everything okay?" Then another message. "If this is about the age rule, please don't take it personally. We're being consistent with everyone." Consistent. Like Nova was a policy, not a person. I didn't reply. Then Reese chimed in on the family group chat. "Zeph's making a statement again." Elaine added, "Don't punish your sister over one night. Family comes first." Family always came first, as long as family looked the way they wanted. Later that week, I went to pick up Nova from her art class. She was quiet in the passenger seat, watching the rain smear the streetlights. Out of nowhere, she said, "I made her something, you know, for the wedding." I looked over. "What kind of something?" She shrugged. "A card, with little bells and glitter. I gave it to her months ago. That night, while cleaning out the trunk of my car, I found it." The card was crushed under an old Starbucks cup, the glitter dulled by spilled coffee. "Congratulations, Aunt Sutton," it said in careful handwriting. The edges were wrinkled, one corner torn. I stood there under the dim garage light, holding it like evidence. Sutton's message had said, "Nothing personal." But as I stared at that ruined card, I realized it had always been personal. The exclusion wasn't about age, it was about belonging. The Maddens had drawn a line and they wanted me to stand on their side of it. But I couldn't not anymore. I went back inside. Nova was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when I came in. "Did she text you again?" I shook my head. "No." "Good," she said softly, then went back to her screen. I sat beside her, watching her reflection in the dark TV screen. For years I'd kept the peace in this family, thinking silence was the price of love. But as I looked at her that night, I realized silence was just another way to let them keep hurting her. And for the first time, I started to wonder what would happen if I finally stopped being the reasonable one. The weekend of Sutton's wedding arrived in a blur of pictures, filters, and perfectly curated smiles. My phone wouldn't stop vibrating, stories tagged, Iris Sutton engaged, champagne fountains, a slow-motion clip of her walking down the aisle, while the caption read, "Our family, our forever." I swiped away before the music started. I'd seen enough. The screen reflected back the faint outline of my face, tired, steady. Behind me, the kitchen smelled like cinnamon and butter. Morgan was flipping French toast in the cast-iron pan, humming along with the jazz on the radio. Nova was at the table by the window, watercolor brushes scattered around her sketchbook. Her world was smaller, but real. "Do you think they'll notice we're not there?" she asked, not looking up from her painting. "They'll notice," I said, stirring my coffee. "But not for the reason you hope." I didn't tell her that Kayla, my cousin, had already texted me earlier that morning, a screenshot from a group chat between Sutton and Reese. Sutton had written, "Please no random teen emo wandering into the wedding shots." Reese replied with a laughing emoji, the kind that made cruelty look casual. I sent Kayla a simple, "Thanks," and nothing else. Outside, the sky was pale and wide. Morgan plated the toast, dusted it with sugar, and asked, So should I pull out the folding chairs for Christmas this year? I looked toward the garage door where those metal chairs leaned against the wall, still faintly smelling of dust and old gatherings. Not sure, I said. Zeph, she murmured, you already know. I didn't answer. Nova painted in silence for a while, the brush moving with a rhythm that belonged to thought more than art. At the engagement party last year, she said suddenly, Aunt Reese didn't even talk to me. I remember. She looked through me like I was just background. I nodded. There wasn't a good answer. Memory slipped in without permission. The engagement party years ago, Nova 12, in a pale blue dress she'd picked herself. The venue had marble floors and a bar taller than her. She stayed glued to my side all night, fingers curling around my sleeve whenever someone brushed too close. No one asked who she was. Sutton had walked by, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "You could have gotten a babysitter." And then there was her 16th birthday. She'd wanted something simple, an art show at the community center, cupcakes, a few friends and family. My parents arrived half an hour late with a card that said, "To a sweet girl," and a $20 bill inside. They left before cake. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I found one of Nova's sketches, the three of us standing in the room, faceless. That one drawing said everything words couldn't. Now, years later, the French toast sizzled in the pan while the phone in my pocket buzzed with filtered perfection from Charleston. Their world looked polished, rehearsed. Ours looked like reality. I caught myself staring at the folding chairs through the kitchen window again, their legs folded in on themselves, waiting. Morgan followed my gaze. "If you don't invite them this year," she said quietly, "that'll be your answer." I nodded slowly. "Yeah," I said. "Maybe it's time our table only fits the people who actually show up." That evening, Nova painted until the sunlight faded, turning the room amber. She didn't ask to check social media. She didn't mention the wedding again. When she finally looked up, she smiled faintly and said, "Can we just stay like this?" I smiled back. "Yeah, kid, we can." And in that small moment, with the smell of cinnamon still hanging in the air, I knew peace was no longer something I had to earn. It was something I could choose. Saturday morning came with sunlight spilling through the blinds and the muffled buzz of notifications. Charleston was already awake, stories, live videos, carefully filtered joy. The Maddens looked radiant in every frame. My sister twirled in her gown, her veil caught in the sea breeze. The caption read, "The perfect day with everyone we love." I turned off my phone before the music could start. Morgan poured coffee and set a mug beside me. "It's today, isn't it?" "Yeah," I said. "They're getting married right about now." From upstairs came the soft sound of brushes clinking in water. Nova was mixing paint, humming quietly. Morgan and I ate breakfast in silence. For once, the quiet didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. Around noon, Nova came downstairs, sleeves rolled up, a faint streak of yellow on her cheek. "I'm working on something," she said. "What is it?" She hesitated. "A wedding painting. Not theirs. Just what I think weddings should feel like." She walked out to the porch and set up her easel. The air outside was cool, sweet, with the smell of grass. I watched her from the doorway, brush moving in slow, deliberate strokes. Every color she chose seemed to be saying something. By late afternoon, my phone lit up again. A new message from Kayla. A picture of Sutton in her wedding dress, smiling, wide champagne glass raised. The caption said, "Family complete, almost." I stared at it for a moment too long. Then I saw something small, almost hidden, the charm tied around Sutton's bouquet. A paper bell glittered, handmade. Nova's card. The one I'd found crumpled under a coffee cup. They'd used it as decoration, a cute touch of whimsy without ever mentioning where it came from. Morgan looked over my shoulder and went still. "That's her card," she said. "Yeah." She gave it meaning and they turned it into a prop. I nodded. They've always loved the idea of her, just not the truth of her. Outside, Nova painted in the fading light. From somewhere down the street, a neighbor's radio played old blues. Inside, the TV showed silent footage of Charleston fireworks, ribbons of gold against the night. The two worlds couldn't have been more different, theirs bursting loud and bright, ours quiet but alive. After dinner, Nova sat on the couch with her sketchbook. If I weren't adopted, she said softly, do you think they'd have invited me? I looked at her for a long time before answering. Maybe. But not because they love you more, just because you'd fit their picture better. She nodded once like she already knew. Later that night, I checked my phone one last time. More photos, more laughter, more captions about love and unity. I deleted every notification, powered the phone off, and left it face down on the counter. When I passed Nova's room, her light was still on. She'd fallen asleep over her desk, the painting unfinished. I walked closer and looked. On the canvas was a couple standing under a string of lights. Their faces were blank. Around them, rows of empty chairs. I turned off the lamp and whispered, "It's okay." Because for the first time I realized that my silence, the silence they called defiance, was the only honest thing left between us. December arrived quietly, the air sharp enough to make breath visible. Most years, this was when I started planning the family dinner, grocery lists on the fridge, the big roast ordered in advance, a dozen folding chairs hauled from the garage so everyone could squeeze into the living room and pretend we still liked each other. But this year, the house stayed still. The only sound was Nova's pencil scratching over paper and the faint hum of the fridge. The group chat lit up early that morning. "Who's bringing dessert to Zephyr's this year?" Sutton asked. Reese replied with a snowflake emoji. My mother wrote, "We'll be 5 again this year. Howard's making his pecan pie." Then a ping. "Do you want us to bring the extra chairs? Honey." I stared at the screen for a long time before locking it. Morgan was rinsing dishes. "You gonna tell them?" she asked. "Tell them what? That you're not hosting?" I shrugged. They'll figure it out. That night, I didn't scrub the table or polish the silverware. The big wreath stayed in its box. Nova gathered dry branches from the yard and tied them together with string hanging scraps of paper stars she cut herself. "It's not perfect," she said. "It's better," I said. The messages kept coming, relentless chirping from the counter. "Do you need help with the turkey? Should we come early to set up? Can't wait to see everyone." I scrolled, felt that familiar weight of obligations settle in my chest, then pushed the phone aside. On December 15th, Reese messaged me privately. "Don't make this harder for Sutton. People are saying you're punishing her." I read it twice, typed nothing, and left it undelivered. Later that day, the phone rang. Elaine. I almost didn't answer, but habit is a hard thing to kill. "Zephyr," she said, her voice already breaking. "Family is everything." "No," I said quietly. "My daughter is everything." I hung up. An hour later, Howard's voicemail came through, full of restrained anger. "You're doing something cruel, son. Christmas is about forgiveness." I let it play to the end, then deleted it. By Christmas Eve, the group chat had gone silent. The stillness felt different this time, not heavy, not expectant, just final. At 9 that night, Reese sent one last message. "It's sad, really. You're isolating her from everyone who loves her." I didn't reply. I looked at Nova sitting on the couch in flannel pajamas, laughing as Morgan tried to pull lasagna out of the oven with a dish towel instead of mitts. The air smelled like cheese and cinnamon, not guilt. We ate dinner by the glow of the small handmade tree. Nova handed me a gift wrapped in brown paper, a drawing of the 3 of us sitting at the same kitchen table, the background fading into soft color. "For next year," she said. I looked around the room, no folding chairs, no polite smiles, no one pretending to listen. Just us and the hum of the house finally breathing again. For the first time in years, I didn't feel empty after the holidays. I felt still, and finally free. The knock came 3 days later when the air outside smelled like snow and burnt leaves. I was making tea. Nova was upstairs in her room sketching for her portfolio. The doorbell rang once, twice, 3 times. Through the glass, I saw my parents, Elaine and Howard, standing on the porch, bundled in coats, a Tupperware container clutched between them. Elaine's smile was tight, her breath visible in the cold. Howard nodded like this was an ordinary visit. "Zephyr," she said. "We thought we'd stop by. Just to talk." I opened the door but didn't step aside. "You can talk from there." She lifted the container a little. "Pecan pie. I made it myself." "I'm sure it's good," I said. "But you should probably take it home before it freezes." Howard sighed, already impatient. You don't have to be like this, son. You're making everything harder than it needs to be. I'm making it honest, I said. Elaine's smile faltered. We all miss the girl. You know she'll be gone soon. She's 17, she'll go off to college, live her own life. Then what, you'll be alone? I'm not alone, I said. I have her. Howard shifted his weight. You're losing your real family over a girl who'll forget about you the moment she grows up. I didn't answer. The cold air bit at my neck, but I didn't move to close the door. Elaine lowered her voice, almost pleading. We know things haven't been easy since you took her in. If it's about money, we can help. We'll make things right if you promise to let this go, to make things normal again. Normal. The word hit me like a slap. Normal was a house where Nova was introduced as his daughter, never our granddaughter. Normal was laughter that left bruises. Howard stepped forward, his tone soft but heavy. Why don't you let her spend a few weeks in Savannah with family? It'll help her feel connected to where she really belongs. She already belongs, I said. Elaine's smile snapped. Zephyr, don't fool yourself. She's not blood. She's not really a Madden. The air went dead. A creak came from behind me. I turned and saw Nova halfway down the stairs, sketchbook clutched to her chest, her face pale but calm. Her voice was steady when she said, So that's what you think. Elaine's eyes widened. Sweetheart, we didn't mean. Don't, I said. You don't get to call her that. Howard looked away, muttering something about me being ungrateful. Elaine straightened her coat. You'll regret this, she said, her voice shaking now. When she leaves you, when she forgets you, our door will still be open. You'll come back. I took a slow breath. The pie looks nice, I said, but your words are poison. Take both with you. I closed the door before they could reply. The click of the lock echoed louder than their footsteps fading down the walkway. For a long time I stood there, forehead against the wood, breathing hard. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder. Nova. They said I'm not blood, she whispered. I nodded. They don't get to hope things about me, she said. Her voice didn't tremble. She set the sketchbook on the table, flipped it open. On the page was a drawing of a house with its front door closed and light spilling out from inside. Outside, two shadows stood in the snow, fading. I looked at her, this girl who once clung to my hand at a gas station, who now stood taller, fiercer, her jaw set like stone, and realized something had shifted. She wasn't the one afraid of being abandoned anymore. She was the one who'd learned how to stay. The house was quiet again. The tea cold on the counter, the world outside hushed beneath the weight of winter. For the first time, I didn't feel like I'd lost family. I felt like I'd finally defined it. It started on a Thursday morning, a week after that scene on the porch. The air outside was sharp and still, the kind that made sound feel smaller. I was at my desk with a half-cold cup of coffee and one of Nova's sketches resting beside my laptop. A rough drawing of our porch, the door closed, light spilling from inside. The house was quiet. Morgan had already left for work and Nova was still asleep upstairs. The notification came with a soft chime. It was from Kayla Pierce, my cousin. Zephyr, you need to see this. Attached was a screenshot of an email thread, the kind that makes your stomach go cold before you even open it. The subject line read, Concern for Zephyr. It was from Reese, sent to the entire extended family. She wrote that I was being manipulated by a troubled teenager, that Nova had isolated me from everyone who cared about me, that I'd fallen into guilt and obsession. She called my silence unstable behavior and said she was worried for my mental health. I scrolled past the paragraphs until I saw her final line. We all love Zeph, but sometimes love means intervention. I didn't feel angry. I felt empty, as if someone had pulled the air from the room. Kayla's message continued. She sent this to everyone, even Uncle Paul in Arizona. Thought you should know. I typed back, thanks, nothing more. Scrolling further down, I saw an image attached to the email, a cropped screenshot from an old conversation between me and my mother. Reese had cut out everything except the sentence, I don't need this family anymore. The full message, the one I actually wrote, had been, "I don't need this family's chaos anymore. I just want peace." But that didn't fit her story. Later that afternoon, while checking Nova's art page, I saw a new comment beneath her latest painting. "You're lucky someone adopted you," it said. No name, no photo. Just an echo of the same cruelty I'd heard all my life dressed up as concern. Nova saw it too. She didn't cry, didn't speak. She just stared at the screen for a moment, then deleted the post and walked to her room. When I followed, she said quietly, "I guess they still think about me, just not in the right way." I sat there long after she closed her door, the anger in me cold and focused. For years, they'd hidden their contempt behind Sunday smiles and dinner toasts. But now with the mask on, I finally saw what I was dealing with: people who would rather destroy my peace than admit they'd hurt a child. So I opened my laptop and created a new folder on the desktop. I named it The Truth Dossier. I started collecting screenshots of texts, photos from birthdays, messages left unanswered, the glittered card Nova made for Sutton's wedding, the pictures of her art show where no one showed up, every moment that proved who they were when no one else was watching. Then I wrote a letter. Simple, measured, final. To anyone who still cares enough to know the truth. I don't need you to take sides. I only need space for the truth to exist. I attached the folder and sent it to every relative whose name was in that email thread. When I clicked send, the clock read 11:11. For a long time, I just sat there staring at the outbox. The silence that followed wasn't peace exactly. It was something sharper, cleaner. A silence that didn't ask to be understood. By evening, the replies began. A few people wrote, "This isn't my place." Some unfriended Reese quietly. Others said nothing at all. None of it mattered. When the sun dipped low, I stepped outside. The air smelled faintly of smoke from someone's fireplace. On the porch railing, there was still a dark stain where my mother had rested that pie container a week before. I ran my finger along it. It was cold, dry, harmless now. Inside the house, Nova was laughing with Morgan over something small. The sound reached me through the open window, soft, real enough. That night, for the first time in years, I understood that peace isn't the absence of noise. It's the presence of self-respect. 6 months later, spring came early to Nashville. The dogwoods were already blooming and the morning smelled like rain and gasoline. We stood at the bus station, Nova's sketch portfolio tucked under her arm, a canvas bag slung across her shoulder. She was leaving for the Art Institute in Asheville. No one from the Maddens had reached out. No calls, no apologies, not even a half-hearted holiday card. The silence had turned from punishment to permanence, and I'd learned to like it that way. Morgan hugged Nova tight, whispering something that made her laugh, then went to grab coffee while we waited for the bus. The platform was quiet except for the sound of tires on wet pavement. Nova looked out toward the street and said, "If I wasn't adopted, do you think they'd have loved me?" I took a breath. They might have pretended better. But no, they wouldn't have loved you more. She nodded slowly. Then I don't need them to. On the drive that morning, Morgan had asked if I missed my family. I told her I miss the idea of them, not who they actually are. Saying it out loud felt like exhaling something heavy that had been sitting in my chest for years. Before we left the house, Nova had placed a small framed painting on the kitchen table. It was the porch again the night I closed the door on my parents, but this time both of us were smiling. The light from inside spilled across our faces like forgiveness. When the bus pulled up, she turned to me and said, "I'm not really going anywhere." "I know," I said. She hugged me hard, long enough for the driver to clear his throat twice. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were dry. "You kept your promise," she said. "Which one?" "That I'd never be temporary." I watched her climb the steps, her sketch portfolio bumping against her knee. The doors closed and the bus eased out of the station. She waved once through the glass, then was gone. My phone buzzed just as I turned to leave. A text from an unknown number. "Our door will always be open when she leaves you. My mother, of course." I blocked the number without replying. That evening, the house felt different. Not empty, just waiting. I made tea, sat by the window, and stared at the sunlight turning gold across the floor. On the fridge was an email notification from an aunt I barely knew. It said, "Thank you for telling the truth. Now I understand." I didn't need understanding anymore, but it was strange how light those words felt. The next day, I printed one of Nova's newest paintings that she'd sent from Asheville, a bright, messy explosion of color, two figures standing side by side, holding hands. I taped it to the refrigerator where everyone could see it, even if everyone was just me and Morgan. For a long time, I'd been afraid of the phrase, "She's not blood." But now it sounded almost small. Blood ties can be coincidence. Love is deliberate. Outside, the rain started again, soft and steady. I sat at the table where we'd once served a dozen people, now holding only 2 mugs of tea and the quiet hum of the house. I didn't need victory. I didn't need forgiveness. I just needed the truth to stand without shaking. I used to think family was something you were born into, but now I know it's a promise you keep over and over even when no one else does. And keeping that promise, I realized, was the only thing that ever made me a father at all. Some stories don't end with a bang, they end with a breath you didn't realize you'd been holding for years. This one did. It didn't finish when the door closed on my parents, or when Reese's email stopped echoing in my inbox, or even when Nova's bus disappeared down that Nashville street. It ended later, quietly, in the small rhythms of life that followed the smell of morning coffee, the half-finished sketches on the kitchen table, the soft laughter that filled a house that no longer needed to prove it was home. I used to think silence was the enemy, something to be filled with apologies, explanations, anything to keep the peace. But silence, when chosen, is power. It's the boundary between what you'll tolerate and what you won't. It's the voice that doesn't need to shout anymore because it finally knows its worth. I don't know if my family ever understood why I walked away. Maybe they still sit around a table somewhere telling themselves I lost my mind, that I turned my back on blood. Maybe they still whisper about the daughter who wasn't really one of us. But none of that matters now. What matters is that I learned how to stay loyal to the truth even when it left me standing alone. Because here's what no one tells you about breaking away from toxic love: it doesn't feel brave at first. It feels lonely. It feels wrong. It feels like betrayal even when you're saving yourself. But slowly you start to breathe easier. Your heartbeat evens out. You laugh without rehearsing it. You look at the people who chose to stay and you realize you've built something sacred out of what was left. Nova taught me that. She taught me that belonging isn't given, it's built piece by piece through loyalty and honesty, and the kind of love that shows up even when it's hard. She never asked for perfect. She just asked to be seen, and when the world refused her, she saw me instead. That's how we both learned what family really means. I think about her sometimes, painting in that small dorm room in Asheville, surrounded by colors that finally belong only to her. I think about the way she said I'm not going anywhere, and how those words have followed me through every quiet morning since. Because she didn't just mean geography. She meant love. She meant permanence. She meant, we're not what they said we were, we're something better. And that's the thing I want to leave you with. Maybe you've been where I was, sitting at a table full of people who call you family but treat your silence like rebellion. Maybe you've been told you're ungrateful for wanting respect. Maybe you've been asked to forgive without anyone ever saying sorry. If that's you, I hope you remember this: peace doesn't come from keeping everyone else comfortable. It comes from choosing yourself even when it costs you the people who never really saw you. Sometimes walking away isn't the end of love, it's the beginning of it. So if my story found you tonight, I hope it reaches that quiet part of you that's tired of performing. The part that just wants to rest, to breathe, to belong without conditions. Because you do. You deserve a kind of love that doesn't ask you to shrink, a home that doesn't need proof of blood to feel real. And if you're listening, really listening, leave a simple word in the comments so I know you're here. Maybe just say hi or tell me where you're from. I love seeing how far a story can travel, how it finds the ones who need it most. It reminds me that silence doesn't always mean isolation. Sometimes it means connection found in new places. Thank you for being here, for sitting with me through this story. If you felt something, if it made you remember your own version of this quiet rebellion, I hope you'll subscribe to the channel. Every story here is a piece of someone choosing truth over comfort. Love over fear. I'm Zephyr Hale, and this was my story about a father, a daughter, and the simple, defiant act of choosing each other. Because in the end, family isn't who shares your blood. It's who stays when everyone else walks away. And sometimes that's enough.